The letter arrived the morning after graduation, slipped under my dorm door like a death sentence wrapped in cream-colored stationery. Inside wasn't congratulations or pride. It was a formal notice that I was no longer welcome at family gatherings, signed by my mother, stepfather, and both my half-brothers. My graduation gift was exile. I read it twice, my coffee growing cold on the windowsill. Outside, other families were loading cars with mini fridges and photo memories. Mine had just erased me with fountain pen ink and legal letterhead. But here's what they didn't know. That letter didn't destroy me. It liberated me. And by the time they realized what they'd thrown away, I was already untouchable.
Stay with me.
Because sometimes the family that abandons you does you the biggest favor of your life. Growing up in Westchester County as Emmett Morrison was like being a constant reminder of someone's mistakes. My mother, Patricia Morrison, had married my biological father during what she called her rebellious phase in college. When that marriage imploded, she upgraded to Richard Morrison. Old money, old values, old prejudices. Richard never said I didn't belong. He just made sure I felt it every day. At dinner parties, I was introduced as Patricia's daughter from her first marriage. Not their daughter, not family, just Patricia's burden with an Asian face that didn't match their Christmas card aesthetic. My half-brothers, Tyler and Mason, inherited Richard's easy confidence and my mother's blonde ambition. They sailed through Phillips Exeter while I worked summers at the local bookstore to save for state school applications. They talked about their trust funds while I applied for financial aid. The thing is, I stopped caring about their approval somewhere around sophomore year of high school. Instead, I started watching, learning, collecting data. I noticed how Richard's pharmaceutical company stock fluctuated based on FDA announcements. How he made certain calls before major news broke. How my mother's charity foundation conveniently allocated funds to companies Richard had interests in. I started keeping records. Not for any particular reason at first. Just insurance. By the time I graduated valedictorian from Millbrook High, an achievement my family missed because they were at Tyler's lacrosse tournament, I had something more valuable than their love. I had leverage, but I didn't plan to use it. Not until that letter arrived. Columbia University became my sanctuary. Not the Columbia of my family's expectations, the one where you network with future senators and marry hedge fund heirs, but the Columbia where you disappear into research labs at midnight and emerge with discoveries that matter. I double majored in computer science and economics, with a minor in something I created myself, algorithmic financial ethics. My professors didn't know what to do with me. My family didn't know what I was doing at all. Professor Sarah Chen, no relation, despite the name, became my mentor in the AI ethics lab. She was brilliant, uncompromising, and had zero patience for students who coasted on connections rather than competence. Emma, she said during my sophomore year, you think differently than your classmates. They're trying to optimize existing systems. You're questioning whether the systems should exist at all. That conversation led to my thesis project, an AI algorithm that could detect patterns of insider trading and market manipulation in real time. What started as academic curiosity became something much more powerful. I called it Transparency Protocol. The algorithm was elegant, ruthless, and absolutely legal. It could analyze trading patterns, cross-reference them with insider information access, and flag suspicious activities with 97.3% accuracy. Better than anything the SEC had. I spent 3 years perfecting it, running simulations on historical data. Every test confirmed what I suspected. The market wasn't just rigged. It was systematically exploited by people who thought they were untouchable. People exactly like Richard Morrison. During winter break of senior year, I ran one final test. I fed my algorithm data from Morrison Pharmaceuticals' trading history over the past decade. The results painted a clear picture of someone who consistently traded on non-public information. I printed the 47-page report, filed it carefully in my desk drawer, and never mentioned it to anyone. After all, I was still trying to be a good daughter then. Graduation day dawned crisp and perfect, Central Park blooming with that late spring optimism that makes New York feel forgiving. I wore the navy dress I'd bought with bookstore earnings, my summa cum laude cords catching sunlight as I walked across the stage. In the audience, I spotted my roommate Maya's entire extended family cheering wildly. 3 rows back, I saw Professor Chen applauding with genuine pride. My family section was empty. They were at Mason's prep school graduation that same weekend. A scheduling conflict, my mother had explained over a text message. Richard had added that they'd make it up to me somehow. But here's what I learned that day. Performing for an empty audience clarifies everything. Without their approval to chase, I finally heard the applause that mattered. My professors. My peers. The tech recruiter, who'd been courting me for months. That night, while my classmates celebrated with family dinners at expensive restaurants, I sat in my dorm room with takeout Chinese and my laptop. I updated my algorithm one final time, incorporating new market data and refining its detection protocols. Then, I did something I'd never done before. I ran a live analysis on current trading activity. The algorithm immediately flagged 3 suspicious patterns. Companies in biotech, defense, and renewable energy. All showing trading spikes that preceded major announcements by days or weeks. One of those companies was Morrison Pharmaceutical. The trades had happened just last month. Someone with advanced knowledge of an FDA approval had bought significant call options 3 days before the announcement. When the approval came through, those options increased in value by 340%. The someone was Richard Morrison. I stared at the screen for a long time, the weight of discovery settling over me like snow. Then I saved the file, encrypted it, and closed my laptop. I still wasn't planning to use it. I was just documenting. The next morning brought that cream-colored envelope and everything changed. Dear Emma, after considerable discussion, we have decided that your presence at family gatherings has become disruptive to family harmony. Your attitude and behavior patterns suggest you would be happier pursuing relationships elsewhere. We will not be expecting you at future holidays, family vacations, or celebrations. We wish you well in your independent pursuits. Sincerely, Patricia Morrison, Richard Morrison, Tyler Morrison, Mason Morrison. Each signature was perfectly practiced, like they'd rehearsed this moment. The paper was expensive, the letterhead embossed. Even my disownment was executed with their trademark attention to presentation. I read it 3 times, waiting for hurt or anger or devastation. Instead, I felt something unexpected, relief. They had finally said out loud what we'd all known for years. I didn't belong in their world of inherited privilege and performed perfection. But here's what they misunderstood. I didn't want to belong there anymore. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in my desk drawer next to my research files, and made a decision that would reshape everything. If they wanted me gone, I would disappear. But not in the way they expected. The first thing I did was delete my social media accounts. All of them. Instagram stories of family gatherings, Facebook check-ins at Morrison family events, LinkedIn connections that trace back to Richard's network. Gone. The second thing I did was change my name legally back to Emma Chen, dropping the Morrison entirely. If they wanted me erased from their family tree, I would make it official. The third thing I did was accept that job offer from Sentinel Technologies, a cybersecurity firm in Austin that specialized in financial fraud detection. They'd been recruiting me for months. The salary was substantial, the work was exactly aligned with my skills, and most importantly, it was 1,200 miles from Westchester County. I graduated on a Tuesday. By Friday, I was driving a rented U-Haul toward Texas with everything I owned fitting comfortably in the back. For the first time in my life, no one knew where I was going or what I was planning. The freedom was intoxicating. Austin welcomed me with breakfast tacos, live music, and a tech scene that cared more about what you could build than where you came from. My coworkers at Sentinel were brilliant, diverse, and refreshingly unimpressed by East Coast pedigree. I threw myself into the work with the intensity of someone who finally had nothing to prove and everything to discover. Financial fraud detection wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary. Every algorithm I refined, every pattern I identified, helped catch people who thought they were too smart and too connected to face consequences. People like Richard Morrison. For 18 months, I perfected my skills during the day and refined my personal project at night. Transparency Protocol evolved from a thesis experiment into something that could change how financial crimes were detected and prosecuted. I was patient, methodical, building towards something I couldn't yet name. Then Maya called with news that changed everything. "Emma, you need to see this," Maya said, her voice tight with anger. She'd remained one of my few connections to my old life, feeding me occasional updates about Columbia gossip and, unfortunately, my family's continued existence in Manhattan social circles. Richard Morrison just donated $15 million to establish the Morrison Family Ethics Center at Columbia Business School, she continued. It's supposed to promote moral leadership in finance. They're having this huge gala next month. Your mother is being featured in town and country as a philanthropist to watch. I sat in my Austin apartment, listening to rain against the windows, processing this information. $15 million for a center dedicated to financial ethics. From a man whose fortune was built on systematic insider trading. There's more, Maya said. Tyler just got engaged to Senator Hamilton's daughter. The announcement specifically mentions how they met at the Morrison Ethics Center's inaugural lecture. They're using this donation to buy social legitimacy. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about irony and justice and the difference between the two. Then I opened my laptop and began to work. Building a case against someone as protected as Richard Morrison required more than evidence. It required strategy, timing, and an understanding of how power really works. I spent 3 months creating what I privately called the Morrison File. It was comprehensive, devastating, and absolutely bulletproof. Trading records spanning 8 years. Communication patterns that correlated suspicious stock purchases with Richard's board meetings. Financial flows that revealed how my mother's charity foundation had been used to launder insider trading profits. But the real breakthrough came when I discovered something even I hadn't expected. While tracking Morrison Pharmaceuticals' recent trading patterns, my algorithm detected activity from multiple accounts, not just Richard's. The trading patterns suggested a coordinated network of insiders, all moving in sync around major announcements. Tyler and Mason weren't just trust fund babies living off daddy's money. They were active participants in the scheme, using their college investment clubs and fraternity connections to spread insider tips and execute trades. My half-brothers had turned their social networks into insider trading rings. Even my mother's charity work wasn't innocent. The Morrison Foundation consistently invested in companies just before Richard's firm announced partnerships or acquisitions. Every philanthropic decision was perfectly timed to generate maximum returns. My entire family was a criminal enterprise wrapped in charity galas and ethics lectures. I documented everything with the precision of someone who understood that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Every allegation was supported by multiple data points. Every connection was traced through public records and financial filings. When I finished, the file was 847 pages long and represented the most comprehensive case of coordinated insider trading I'd ever seen. But I still wasn't ready to act. I needed the perfect moment, a time when the revelation would have maximum impact and minimum chance of being buried by expensive lawyers and media manipulation. Then I saw the invitation to the Morrison Family Ethics Center Gala, forwarded by Maya as a joke. "You should crash it," she'd written. "Show them what real ethics looks like." I stared at the invitation for a long time, studying the elegant typography and Richard's name prominently featured as the keynote speaker on building integrity in financial leadership. That's when I knew exactly what I was going to do. I flew back to New York on a cold October evening, 2 years and 4 months after my exile. The city looked different through the window of my taxi, smaller, somehow, less imposing. I checked into a boutique hotel in Soho under my legal name, Emma Chin. The desk clerk didn't recognize the Morrison connection, which was exactly the point. The Morrison Family Ethics Center Gala was being held at the Plaza because of course it was. Old money always celebrates new moral authority in the same gilded ballrooms where it had been quietly corrupted for generations. I spent 2 days preparing. Not just the evidence that had been ready for months. I prepared emotionally, mentally, strategically. I rehearsed conversations I might have, anticipated reactions, planned escape routes. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about accountability. The night of the gala, I dressed carefully in a charcoal gray suit that looked expensive without being flashy. Professional. Trustworthy. The kind of outfit worn by someone who dealt in facts, not drama. I arrived at the plaza just as cocktail hour was beginning, my press credentials identifying me as a financial journalist from a respected Austin business publication, credentials that were both real and recently acquired for exactly this purpose. The ballroom buzzed with Manhattan's financial elite, all gathered to celebrate my family's moral transformation. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, observing conversations about market trends and philanthropic strategy, listening to people praise the Morrison family's commitment to ethical leadership. It would have been funny if it weren't so perfectly ironic. From across the room, I spotted my family holding court near the main stage. My mother looked elegant in navy silk, greeting donors and posing for photos. Tyler and his fiancée worked the crowd with practiced charm. Mason had brought his girlfriend, a blonde investment banker who laughed at the right moments and name-dropped with surgical precision. And Richard stood at the center of it all, silver-haired and confident, accepting congratulations for his moral leadership with the ease of someone who genuinely believed his own performance. None of them saw me. I was just another journalist in a sea of suits and champagne glasses. I waited until Richard began his keynote speech about integrity in finance. Until the room was full of applause and cameras and recorded testimony about the importance of ethical behavior in financial markets. Then I stood up and asked my question. "Mr. Morrison," I called out, my voice carrying clearly across the hushed ballroom. "Given your family's commitment to financial ethics, how do you reconcile tonight's message with a coordinated insider trading that has generated your wealth for the past decade?" The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the ice settling in water glasses 3 tables away. Richard's face went through several expressions very quickly: confusion, recognition, anger, calculation. Around the room, people turned in their seats, trying to identify the source of such an impertinent question. "I'm sorry," Richard said, his voice carefully controlled. "I don't recognize the question or the questioner." "Emma Chun, financial journalist," I replied, standing so he could see me clearly. "I'm researching patterns of insider trading in pharmaceutical stocks, and I'm curious about your thoughts on regulatory enforcement." I watched my family's faces as they processed this information. My mother's hand flew to her throat. Tyler actually took a step backward. Mason was frantically whispering to his girlfriend. But Richard was older, more experienced at damage control. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding," he said smoothly. "Perhaps we could discuss your questions after the presentation." "Actually," I continued, pulling out a folder from my bag, "I think this is the perfect venue for a discussion about financial ethics. I have here documented evidence of coordinated trading activity by Morrison Pharmaceutical leadership, including trades that preceded FDA announcements by an average of 3.7 days over the past 8 years. The murmur that rippled through the crowd was like electricity. Camera phones appeared. Real journalists started taking notes. Richard's composed expression finally cracked. "Security," he called out. But I was already moving toward the stage, my voice carrying across the ballroom. "The trading patterns show profits of approximately $43 million from information that was material and non-public at the time of purchase." Security guards were approaching, but the crowd was leaning in, hungry for details. This was better than gossip. This was scandal unfolding in real time. Furthermore, I continued, reaching the microphone before security could intercept me. This activity involved multiple family members using charitable foundation resources to launder proceeds, constituting wire fraud, securities fraud, and tax evasion. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters rushed toward the stage. Richard was shouting something about defamation while my mother stood frozen in horrified shock. "I have copies of all relevant documentation," I announced, holding up several thick folders, including communications between family members coordinating trades and financial records showing foundation investments timed to benefit from non-public information. That's when Tyler finally recognized my voice. "Emma," he said, loud enough to be heard. "Emma Morrison?" "Chun." I corrected into the microphone, looking directly at him. "Emma Chun." I had my name legally changed after receiving a formal letter disinviting me from family gatherings 2 years ago. The delicious irony hung in the air like champagne bubbles. The family that had exiled me for being disruptive to their harmony was about to discover what actual disruption looked like. Security finally reached me, but it was too late. The story was already breaking on social media. Phones were recording. Journalists were calling editors. As I was escorted from the ballroom, I caught my mother's "I won last time." She looked like someone watching her carefully constructed world collapse in real time. Because that's exactly what was happening. The Morrison Family Ethics Center lasted exactly 18 hours. By the next morning, Columbia had announced a temporary suspension of programming pending review. The $15 million donation was quietly returned. The prestigious gala became a cautionary tale about the importance of vetting major donors. The SEC opened an investigation within 72 hours. The FBI followed a week later. Every major financial news outlet picked up the story, and my carefully documented evidence provided them with enough material for months of follow-up reporting. Richard was arrested at his office on a Tuesday morning, led away in handcuffs while reporters captured every moment. Tyler and Mason were indicted 3 weeks later. My mother, as it turned out, had been more involved in the money laundering than even I had suspected. The Morrison family name became synonymous with financial fraud and charitable deception. Everything they had built, the reputation, the social standing, the carefully crafted image of moral authority, vanished like smoke. I watched it all unfold from my apartment in Austin, reading news alerts while drinking coffee that tasted like vindication. But the real satisfaction came in the quiet moments. When I deposited my whistleblower reward check, 30% of recovered assets, totaling $12.9 million. When I received job offers from every major financial enforcement agency in the country. When Columbia offered me an endowed chair to establish a real center for financial ethics research. Most satisfying of all was the letter I received from Maya 6 months later. She'd forwarded me a clipping from the Westchester social pages. A tiny announcement buried in the back section. Patricia Chin Morrison has relocated to upstate New York and is seeking employment in retail management. Patricia had legally changed her name back, dropping the Morrison entirely. Just like I had. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic confrontation or public humiliation. Sometimes it's giving people exactly what they asked for and letting them discover what they actually lost. They wanted me gone from their family. I gave them what they wanted, but I also gave them a choice. Maintain their criminal behavior without me there to document it, or face the consequences of what they'd already done. They chose poorly. I still have that original letter, the one that rewrote my life. It sits in my desk drawer, filed between my congressional testimony on financial fraud reform and my Harvard Business Review article on algorithmic detection of insider trading. Sometimes I take it out and reread those carefully crafted sentences about how my presence was disruptive to family harmony. The irony never gets old. Because they were right, in a way. I was disruptive. I disrupted their comfortable criminal enterprise. I disrupted their purchased moral authority. I disrupted their assumption that family loyalty meant complicit silence. I just did it on my own terms, in my own time, with my own definition of justice. The Austin tech scene embraced me completely. I launched my own firm specializing in financial fraud detection, with clients ranging from small startups to Fortune 500 companies. My algorithms have caught 17 major fraud schemes and recovered over $200 million in stolen assets. I never married into old money or social prominence. Instead, I built something more permanent: expertise, integrity, independence. Last month, I received an invitation to speak at Columbia's new Center for Financial Justice, the program that replaced Richard's failed ethics center. The topic: how technology can level the playing field in financial crime detection. I accepted immediately. Not because I need their platform or their validation, but because I want to stand in that same ballroom and talk about real ethics to people who genuinely want to learn. Sometimes justice looks like dramatic confrontation and handcuffs and front-page headlines. But sometimes it looks like building something better in the space where broken people used to stand. My family wrote me out of their story because they thought I was the weak variable in their equation. They never realized I was actually the solution. If you've ever been told you don't belong, if you've ever been dismissed by people who mistake money for worth, this one's for you. Sometimes the family that rejects you does you the biggest favor of your life. Sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's preparation. And the quiet triumph that follows is sweeter than any reconciliation could ever be. The letter that was supposed to end my story actually rewrote it entirely. And I wouldn't change a single word.